serve Westside as minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And this morning we're going to be talking about some things that are both personal and also global. So today we're meeting to consider how to think about the future, how to chart our future, our personal future, our individual lives, but also our future as Unitarian Universalists, and perhaps our future as Americans this week, our future as global citizens. It's been a profoundly transformative last year. This time last year, think back to January of last year. Take a minute and just think about January of last year. This time last year, there was this odd new virus in China that was barely getting any attention in the United States. We were a little frustrated with our political situation, but we were plodding along, and we were pretty much comfortable in our usual Sunday morning routines at the church. A lot has changed in the last year. In the last many months, our habits as members of communities has been radically altered by the pandemic, by our assumptions about safety being shattered in ways we couldn't have predicted, and also our assumptions about what we can expect tomorrow or next week, and I would say particularly this next week or next month, that's become a little shaky. In other words, we're living in a time that is changing profoundly around us. The ground shifts under our feet weekly, if not daily, and it's all kind of destabilizing. So this is what I would describe as liminal space. We're between things. We're not where we were in the past for certain, but we're also not at all yet settled in the new where we're going to be. We are in between things. And we're going to talk about that today. We're actually going to be talking about that for a few months. This is an uncomfortable space for most of us to be in, liminal space. So self-care and community support are really important at times like this. But it's also a really fruitful kind of time. It's a time when we can reevaluate and renew our commitments. We can think carefully about what matters to us, what is essential to who we are, and what's just simply habit. And we can set intentions for moving forward that help us let go of what has to be let go and hold on to that which we consider the most important to hold on to. So today we're going to be starting a sort of journey together as a community. For the coming months, we're going to be thinking about a few questions. For the first couple months of the year, we're going to be asking, where we come from? What did we assume or treasure in the past? What were the things specifically that we liked about Westside, but also about our lives in general that may or may not be possible to carry forward into this new reality that we're all facing? Then we're going to spend a couple months asking, who are we really? What is essential? What is essential to each of us individually and to us collectively? What is the essence rather than the surface of who we are? And finally, we'll be asking, where are we going? How do we integrate the profound changes into our lives that have happened in the last few months and still be true to our deepest values? What new things are we going to have to try, and what new experiences will we have to open ourselves to in order to move forward? So today I'm going to invite you to breathe deeply as we begin this journey together. So I'm going to light our chalice, and then I'm going to invite us into a few moments of reflection. The chalice is a really important symbol that we as Unitarian Universalists have carried forward for a very long time, for many, many years, and in many contexts. Now, the chalice had its origins in a logo that was designed by Austrian refugee Hans Deutsch for the Unitarian Service Committee, which is now called the UU Service Committee. And it was designed during World War II. This symbol it was a logo that became an important underground symbol in occupied Europe during the war for those who were assisting Unitarians, Jews, and others trying to escape Nazi persecution. So the symbol is something that has become essential to Unitarian Universalism We carry that same spirit forward today, especially this week, as we recommit to our values of democracy, equity, justice, and compassion. And the words for our chalice lighting come from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose life and work we celebrate this week. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So as I light our chalice, let us take a moment to simply breathe, deepen into our own hearts and into this community. I invite you to breathe for a moment, close your eyes if it makes you feel comfortable, and just reflect on what you treasure, what you've had to let go of, and what you might be hoping for. Breathing in, we breathe in peace. Breathing out, we breathe out hope. Breathing in, we breathe in hope. Breathing out, we breathe out love. Breathing in, we breathe in love. Breathing out, we breathe out peace. May that be so. So there are words for one of our UU hymns that say draw the circle wide. And the circle, the chalice is a circle, and a lot of our symbols are circular symbols. And so this circle image in our UU tradition is a really important one. And we have another song that includes that called Circle Round for Freedom. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, right? So we have this idea that we make a circle and that somehow it's a symbol of our wholeness and our ability to include people and our ability to be one. So think for a minute about what the circle means to you. Who gets included in our circle and who is outside the circle? What experiences get included in our circle and what experiences are outside our circle? Now, this might be the circle of our Sunday morning church gathering, might be the circle of your own personal life. Who do you include in your circle? When we come to a place like Westside, we are coming because we want to be included in a circle. And when we come at the beginning, it may be a very new circle. There may be new things. When we get into the circle, we have a tendency to want it to stay safe the way we're used to it. We have a tendency to want to go into circles and to have the circle stay safe and similar and familiar. But life doesn't work like that. Change is constant. And when we come into a circle, we often think we're coming into a circle where everyone is like us. And again, we know that that's not true either. We share things that are similar, but we also are different. So when we come to a place like Westside, we come from many different stories, many different experiences, many different assumptions. We do have similarities. We also have differences. And yet we choose to make a circle of community. And this is a choice. The circle is a place to turn when we are frightened, as many of us have been in recent weeks and may be this week. We turn to the circle of community when we want to celebrate or when we want to struggle with ideas or to make sense of things. We turn to the circle when we are grieving. This particular community, Westside UU Church, has been a circle for nearly 40 years now. It was founded in 1984 by folks from the larger congregations of Tennessee Valley UU and Oak Ridge UU. And they felt that there should be a congregation in West Knoxville. So they formed a congregation in Farragut. They first met at Farragut High School, and then they met in the high school, and then they had a storefront on Kingston Pike. And eventually they bought the property that we now call home on Fretz Road. So the first services were held at the Fretz Road site in 1998. Through the last 37 years, people have participated in fellowship and seeking and searching, actions for justice, celebrations of worship, sharing joys and concerns, and just being together for a long time. For 37 years, people have celebrated their joys and mourned their sorrows together. They've done actions for justice. They've explored new ways of thinking and knowing and listened to speakers, some of whom they agreed with, some of whom they disagreed with. They've grown together and they've had conflicts. In 2009, after a long period of learning and conversation, Westside became an official welcoming congregation. We've marched in MLK parades and in Pride parades. We've hosted dozens of families over the last 8 years in our Family Promise program. We've seen children born and go through our programs and grow up and become adults. We've attended general assemblies. We've hosted workshops and events. A few years ago, some of you may remember we helped to create a massive all Knoxville area worship service when the UUA board was in town, where we had over 700 local UUs together in one place for a Sunday morning worship. It was amazing. It was led by our denominational president, Susan Frederick Gray. Committees have formed at Westside and disbanded and then reformed. Troubles have come up and been resolved. Sometimes we have hurt each other and then we've healed. Up until only last year, we had a number of founding members and those who were around in those early storefront days with us. Sadly, we've lost a lot of those folks in the last many months, but their legacy is echoing on in all that we experience when we're together at Westside. And I guarantee you that if you are in conversation long enough with anyone who's been at Westside more than a few years, you are talking to someone who has chaired a committee or sat on the board of trustees or taught an RE class or led the book group or created a fabulous auction dinner or event or baked the best cookies for potluck. So the community has a lot of history and everyone has contributed to it. I know that I could never have imagined how much things would change since last March 12th. We're coming up on a year. In about 6 weeks, it's going to have been a year. I assumed this time last year, as most of us did, that our habits and our routines, while they might vary a little bit as people came and went, that those habits would basically stay the same. But this last year has taught me, and all of us, I think, that such assumptions might not serve us well going forward. So I know that this phrase has gone through your minds. Times they are a changin', right? I know that I am not the only person who has thought that line in the last many months, right? So Bob Dylan's 1964 anthem for another time of great social upheaval still rings true for us. And I thought it would be useful to look at the words, the actual words of that song. Here's the first verse. Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept that it's soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone. For the times they are a changin'. So the first message here is there's no going back. We must adapt if we are to move forward. We must begin to admit that what has gone, some of it is gone for good, and acknowledge that we are ourselves changed by what has changed around us. Technology has changed. Our assumptions about how to connect have changed. Our assumptions about safety have changed. We must adapt. Here's the second verse. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for times they are a-changing. Now that's sort of a haunting verse right now. The circumstances are slightly different now than what Dylan was singing about. The battle, in fact, actually breached the walls where senators and representatives met to carry out the work of this nation. The sentiment is the same. We rely on our elected officials and our leaders to adapt the methods of their time in ways that uphold timeless values essential to democracy. But this holds true for us too, as well, folks. It's not just the people in Washington that have to help uphold those values. We're all leaders in one way or another. We participate in public organizations. We attend meetings and social gatherings, even if so virtually right now. We mentor children and young adults, and we vote. So we all have to consider our responsibility to one another and to our society and stand up with courage and conviction in these times in the way that is right and safe for each of us. Here's the third verse, where Dylan also asks us to step back where we're unable to step up. And this is an important thing that we often forget when we think about social change. Sometimes social change needs to happen, but we are not able to be the ones making it happen. Here's Dylan's words. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. So there are causes and social changes that I can't personally get behind, movements I don't understand or I don't know how to support. So how do we handle those changes? For me, for the changes that are simply beyond me, I have to turn and listen to people that I respect and trust and value and ask, do I trust them enough to honor that they say this change is important? Because really, there are people sometimes who we have to follow when we don't know how. So sometimes we have to simply accept that changes are going to happen and we need to allow them. So there's these different ways of changing, right? One is leading, one is following, one is simply adapting personally. All of that is really hard. We are in the middle of a lot of that. Social norms are changing. Communication norms are changing. Here at Westside, one of the things we're talking about is, well, you know, we're doing worship virtually now, and we're not going to stop doing that. We're not exactly sure how we'll do it, but we've realized that we have to include people who want to come to worship virtually. So we have to adapt. Our political situation is changing, and we're all going to have to adapt. But this change isn't necessarily easy. We have a tendency to cling to what we've known and what has worked for us in the past, and we do that for a really good reason, because it had value. Because the things that we have done before often had value. But we often mistake the pattern or the habit for the actual value itself. I had a conversation with someone this week where I was asking, well, how do you identify the core value in something that's not just the action? That's a trick we could all stand to learn. And it's what we're going to be talking about in the next few months. We have a tendency to want that circle to stay still. We have a tendency for things to want things to just stop moving around so much once in a while. I have certainly been feeling that way lately, right? I would like something to just be predictable and stable. And yet right now, well, personal stillness, that choice to be still for yourself, can be a healthy choice. I'm going to sit still. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to rest. I'm not going to do anything. That can be really important for well-being. It's probably not a social strategy. It's not a community strategy. Institutions can pause, but they can't stop. And that's true of Westside. We have to move forward. It's a new decade in a new century, and times are certainly changing. So how do we do that? So how do we actually move forward in a way that doesn't feel reactive, but that allows us to carry forward what we value while also really changing with the world? Here's just my approach to it. So for me, the first step is honoring what was. It's sort of like a grieving process, acknowledging and treasuring and valuing what has passed. Really taking time to do that. Asking ourselves, what do we have to let go of? What is it that was in the past that we love that's changed? And why do we love it? That's the most important thing. Why did we love it? What was so important about it? So it's easy to say potlucks were great. But potluck, it's not the act of potluck that's important. It's the sort of intangible qualities that potluck conveys that are important. So honoring that. And second, exploring what is essential rather than just habitual material habits in the past, looking at the qualities of our experiences that are essential to us. So we might say that, well, potlucks were a great way to have fellowship, but what really mattered was fellowship, being together, okay? Unstructured time together, nourishment, conversation. So finally, if we've done that, the third step for me is setting intentions for the future that allow those essential values like fellowship and unstructured time and nourishment to be expressed in ways that meet new needs or meet a new context. We have to invite some inspiration into ourselves and some courage for that part of the journey, for going forward. Because we have to ask of ourselves and one another some risky challenges of changing, making brave new choices while holding and being loyal to the values that we had in the past. And that's work that's in front of all of us. I've been thinking about it a lot right now, and that's actually true for all of us as individuals because we are part of a society. Our society is changing at a phenomenal rate. It's resulting in enormous conflict in our culture, in our political system. It's also resulting in enormous conflict in families. I've seen, as I speak with people, enormous conflict in families and enormous change for us personally. We really can't avoid it. So first, I'm really glad that we have a circle to be together in. That makes it easier. I personally treasure this circle. And I also have faith in our ability to grow that circle wider and to adapt and expand it. I think we all need to count on each other's courage and creativity together and our willingness to be inventive and brave. In the coming weeks, we're going to be talking about what we have loved. As Suzanne was telling us, we're going to be talking about how did you come to Westside in the first place? What did you like about it? Why? Especially what we've loved that we feel may be changing, because some things are going to change here at Westside. And we're going to talk about how that affects us personally, how the world changing is affecting us in our lives. Our closing words today come from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. again. And he was always a spokesperson for hope of positive change. He said this: human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. The ultimate measure of a person is not where we stand in moments of comfort and convenience. It is where we stand at times of challenge and controversy. So let's be willing to first see the need for change, not just outside of ourselves in the world out there, but also in ourselves, within our hearts and in our habits. And let's have the courage and conviction to set aside, pardon me, fear and act with hope. I invite you, I'm sorry, that choked me up a little bit. I invite you to invoke the spirit of courage and hope in times that are challenging. I'm going to leave the chalice lit as we enter coffee hour in our conversation time, because that symbol is important. It's a symbol we carry forward to speak of truth and of justice and of warmth and of love and of hope and commitment. So as we go into our time of conversation where we can talk about how things are going for us right now and how we're responding to these changes, the light of the chalice carries these things forward. And even when we're not together, we know that it burns in our hearts. So thank you all for being part of this community, for being willing to be part of growing and changing and also holding true to our essential values. May it be so. May we have peace in this week. I'm going to stop our recording now.